What if I told you that the greatest barriers to your liberation aren't external circumstances, but rather the people with whom you've surrounded yourself? You see, we often speak of releasing negative thoughts, harmful habits, limiting beliefs, but rarely do we examine the human vessels through which these toxins flow into our lives. Think about it. The people closest to you are either expanding your consciousness or constricting it. They're either watering your spirit or slowly poisoning it. But here's the thing. Recognizing these 9 archetypal figures requires not judgment of others, but a profound and often uncomfortable self-honesty. Let me tell you something about the 9 people standing between you and your authentic existence. We live in a culture that celebrates relationship permanence above all else. From childhood, we're taught that maintaining connections is virtuous, that longevity in relationships is the ultimate marker of success. 50-year marriages are commemorated regardless of their quality. Lifelong friendships are honored regardless of their depth. The duration becomes the achievement rather than the growth that occurred within that time. But this fixation on permanence is fundamentally a Western invention, a cultural artifact rather than a universal truth. In Eastern philosophies, there exists a profound appreciation for impermanence, for the natural cycles of coming together and moving apart. The Japanese concept of mono no aware embraces the poignant awareness of transience. Nothing lasts forever. No relationship is meant to. This isn't tragedy. This is cosmic design. You see, relationships are not unlike gardens. We've been taught to water and nurture them, to tend to them with care and dedication. But what the gardening metaphor so often leaves out is the equally important act of pruning. Every skilled gardener knows that for a garden to truly flourish, certain growths must be cut away. The dead wood must be removed. The invasive species must be uprooted. This isn't an act of destruction, but an act of protection, of creating space for what truly belongs to thrive. Have you ever considered that your loyalty to certain people might be disloyalty to yourself? That your commitment to maintaining relationships at all costs might be a profound betrayal of your own spirit? We're taught to see separation as failure, as giving up. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if certain separations are not failures, but successes, not acts of giving up, but acts of moving forward? I once knew a woman who maintained a friendship for 27 years with someone who consistently diminished her spirit. Year after year, she would leave their encounters feeling smaller, emptier, less certain of herself. But she maintained this connection out of a sense of duty, out of the belief that long relationships were inherently valuable. She would say to me, "I've known her since college. We have history," as if history alone were reason enough to sacrifice her present and future. This woman was not unique. We all do this. We maintain connections with people who deplete us, who confuse us, who misunderstand us at such a fundamental level that true connection is impossible. They will drain you. They will confuse you. They will diminish you. Yet we stay, believing that the problem must be with us, that if only we were more patient, more understanding, more something, these relationships would transform. But here's the thing. Some relationships aren't meant to be transformed. Some relationships are meant to be released. Not because you've failed, not because the other person is bad or wrong, but because the energetic exchange between you no longer serves the highest good of either party. Think about it. Every person in your life is either a mirror, a window, or a wall. The mirrors reflect you back to yourself, helping you see who you truly are. The windows open to new perspectives, expanding your view of what's possible. But the walls block your path, restrict your movement, limit your potential. And what do we do with walls that no longer serve a purpose? We don't try to transform them into mirrors or windows. We simply create a door and walk through. What if the greatest act of compassion both to yourself and others is sometimes separation? What if by holding on to relationships that have served their purpose, you're not only restricting your own growth, but theirs as well? What if your presence in their life is preventing them from encountering the very people and experiences that would catalyze their evolution? Now, I'm not saying this is easy. Our resistance to letting go runs deep. We fear the empty space that will remain. We dread the discomfort of change. We worry about hurting others, about being judged, about what it means about us if we're the kind of person who walks away. These fears are natural, but they need not be our masters. Because the truth is, removing certain people from your life isn't about rejection at all. It's about creation. It's about making space for authentic connection, for relationships that resonate with who you are becoming rather than who you once were. It's about honoring the truth that people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it's not our job to force every relationship into the lifetime category. There's a profound liberation that comes with recognizing that not every relationship is meant to last forever. That some people are in your life to teach you a specific lesson, to help you develop a particular quality. And once that purpose has been fulfilled, it is not only acceptable but necessary to move on. This isn't cruelty. This is cosmic efficiency. You see, we are not static beings. We are constantly evolving, shedding old identities, developing new capacities, expanding our consciousness. And as we change, it's only natural that our relationship needs change as well. The companions who were perfect for one phase of your journey may be completely wrong for the next. The mentors who guided you to this point may be unable to take you further. This is not their failure or yours. It's simply the way of things. So as we move forward, I want to invite you to approach your relationships with a new level of consciousness. To ask yourself not just how long you've known someone, but how you feel in their presence. Whether they expand or contract you. Whether they celebrate your growth or resist it. Whether they see you clearly or through the distorted lens of their own projections. Now let me share with you the 9 archetypal figures that most commonly obstruct the path to your authentic becoming. These are the people who, despite perhaps good intentions, are blocking your evolution. Learning to recognize them is the first step toward liberating yourself from their influence. And remember, this isn't about blaming them or vilifying them. It's about seeing clearly, so that you can choose consciously. Because in the end, the quality of your life will be determined by the quality of your relationships. And the quality of your relationships begins with your willingness to choose them with awareness. The first archetype you must remove from your life is the validator. You know this person, don't you? They arrive in your world with an emptiness that seems bottomless. No matter how much reassurance you provide, no matter how many compliments you offer, no matter how consistently you bolster their fragile self-image, it is never enough. Their need for validation is insatiable because it comes from a wound that external words cannot heal. What makes this relationship so depleting is the parasitic nature of the energy exchange. You pour and pour and pour, and yet the vessel never fills. But have you considered that in this dynamic, you too are seeking something? There is a subtle addiction forming on both sides. They become addicted to your validation, and you, perhaps without realizing it, become addicted to being needed, to being the source of their temporary relief. I once knew a woman who spent 15 years in friendship with someone who required constant reassurance. Every decision, every outfit, every interaction with others needed to be processed, analyzed, and ultimately validated by my friend. At first, she felt important, necessary, even wise. But slowly, imperceptibly, this relationship drained her life force. She had become so habituated to directing her energy outward to maintain her friend's emotional equilibrium that she had nothing left for her own growth, her own dreams, her own becoming. You see, the spiritual lesson here is profound. When we participate in these validation cycles, we prevent both ourselves and the other person from developing authentic self-worth. We create the illusion that worthiness comes from outside, that it must be continuously earned and reaffirmed by others. But true worth can only be discovered within. It cannot be given or taken by another. The liberation that comes from removing the validator from your life is twofold. Not only do you reclaim your energy for your own evolution, but you also give them the gift of confronting their own emptiness directly. It is only in that confrontation, uncomfortable as it may be, that they might discover the self-validation that no external source could ever provide. The second archetype to remove is the time thief. These are the people who seem oblivious to the finite nature of your existence. They consume your hours, your days, your weeks without consciousness or consideration. They call with non-emergencies. They extend meetings beyond their usefulness. They create problems that you must solve. They demand attendance at events that serve no purpose in your growth. Think about it. Time is the only truly non-renewable resource you possess. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose status and regain it. You can even lose health and sometimes restore it. But a moment gone is gone forever. Yet how carelessly we allow others to take this precious resource from us. Time in human life is like water in the desert. Every drop is sacred, meant to nourish something vital. When you allow time thieves to remain in your life, you permit the divine water of your existence to be poured onto barren ground. Nothing grows, nothing flourishes. It simply disappears into the sand. Now, the paradoxical truth about time thieves is that by protecting your time from them, you actually offer them a profound gift. You teach them about boundaries, about self-reliance, about the true value of human existence. Your refusal to be casually available becomes a lesson in conscious living that they may not receive elsewhere. When you remove time thieves from your life, you suddenly discover how much space opens up for what truly matters. Projects you never had time for suddenly become possible. Relationships that nourish you can be deepened. Your own inner voice, so long drowned out by the demands of others, can finally be heard. Your authentic priorities emerge from the silence that follows their absence. The third archetype you must remove is the certainty merchant. These are the people who traffic in absolutes in an inherently uncertain universe. They have an answer for everything. They know precisely how the world works, how you should live, what is right, and what is wrong. They offer you the seductive comfort of certainty in exchange for the wild freedom of your own discovery. Our culture has developed an addiction to certainty that borders on the pathological. We crave clear answers, definitive paths, guaranteed outcomes. This craving makes us vulnerable to those who speak with unwavering conviction, who present themselves as authorities on the mysteries of existence. We surrender our own exploration for the comfort of their ready-made worldviews. I remember a teacher who once gathered many followers with his absolute statements about reality. He had created an entire philosophical system that explained everything from the cosmic to the mundane. His students, relieved of the burden of their own seeking, adopted his certainties wholesale. But I watched as their natural curiosity atrophied, as their spiritual muscles weakened from disuse. They had traded the uncomfortable adventure of not knowing for the stagnant comfort of borrowed knowing. The spiritual lesson here is that authentic discovery requires a comfort with uncertainty, a willingness to dwell in the question rather than leap to the answer. When we allow certainty merchants to dominate our intellectual and spiritual landscape, we forfeit the most essential human capacity: to wonder, to explore, to find our own way through the beautiful mystery of existence. By removing these influences from your life, you open the door to genuine wisdom, which almost always begins with 3 simple words: I don't know. In that humble space of not knowing, true discovery becomes possible. Your mind relaxes its grip on predetermined conclusions and opens to revelation. The 4th archetype to release is the spiritual competitor. These are the people who have managed the remarkable feat of turning awakening into a contest. They collect spiritual experiences like trophies. They measure their worth by the depth of their meditation, the number of retreats they've attended, the famous teachers they've studied with, or the altered states they've achieved. This is perhaps the cleverest trick the ego ever devised. Having realized it cannot defeat the spiritual journey, it decides instead to co-opt it. It transforms the path of surrender into a path of achievement. It turns the journey of dissolving into a journey of becoming. The very process meant to diminish the ego becomes its greatest strengthening mechanism. The irony here is exquisite, isn't it? Competitive enlightenment, racing towards stillness, fighting for peace, demanding recognition for selflessness. The contradictions would be humorous if they weren't so tragic in their consequences. You know this person, don't you? The one who casually mentions their 3-hour daily meditation practice when you admit to struggling with sitting for 20 minutes. The one who responds to your meaningful insight with a story of their more meaningful insight. The one who can never simply meet you in shared humanity because they're too busy climbing the invisible ladder of spiritual accomplishment. The deepest spiritual lesson here is that comparison is the death of authentic discovery. Your journey is yours alone. It unfolds according to your unique karma, your particular wounds, your specific gifts. The moment you begin measuring your progress against another, you have left the path entirely. You are no longer walking your journey, but rather attempting to walk someone else's. When you remove spiritual competitors from your life, you discover the profoundly non-linear nature of growth. You realize that awakening doesn't proceed according to schedule or plan. It has its own organic timing, its own mysterious unfolding. Some of your most significant breakthroughs might come during mundane moments, rather than dramatic spiritual experiences. Your path begins to take its natural shape, rather than conforming to someone else's expectations. How many authentic insights have you missed while trying to keep pace with someone else's spiritual journey? How much genuine connection with the divine have you sacrificed at the altar of spiritual accomplishment? Now, these 4 archetypes represent the more obvious barriers to your authentic becoming: the validator, the time thief, the certainty merchant, and the spiritual competitor. They drain your energy, waste your time, limit your exploration, and distort your journey. But these 4 are merely the surface-level barriers. Let us go deeper into the more subtle archetypal figures that may be more difficult to recognize, yet even more essential to remove from your life. The 5th archetype to remove from your life is the possibility assassin. These are the people who specialize in explaining why your new ideas, your ventures, your creative impulses cannot and will not succeed. Before your possibilities have drawn their first breath, these individuals have already prepared their eulogy. They arrive with a clipboard of practicalities, a checklist of potential failures, and an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone who has tried something similar and fallen short. But here's the thing about possibilities. They are the very mechanism through which the universe expands. Every star, every planet, every living creature began as a possibility before it manifested into form. The cosmos itself is an exercise in ongoing creation, in saying yes to what might be. When we align with this creative principle, we participate in the fundamental nature of existence. But when we surround ourselves with those who contract around fear, who close down around what might go wrong, we position ourselves against the expansive current of life itself. I once knew a brilliant man, a true visionary in his field. His mind was a garden of innovative ideas, each one with the potential to shift paradigms, to open new territories of thought. But in his inner circle was a friend, a confidant who appointed himself the voice of reason. Year after year, this friend would listen to these nascent ideas and systematically dismantle them. Too expensive, too complicated, too different from how things are done, not practical in the current market. And slowly, painfully, I watched as this visionary began to doubt himself, to question his instincts, to lose faith in his own creative impulse. His garden of possibilities withered under this constant shadow of cynicism. You see, creation requires protection in its early stages. Just as a seedling needs a greenhouse to shield it from harsh elements, your new ideas, your becoming self, your creative endeavors need a protective space away from cynicism and doubt. This is not about hiding from practical concerns or constructive feedback. Those have their place, but only after the possibility has been given room to take root, to establish itself, to grow strong enough to withstand scrutiny. When you remove possibility assassins from your life, you experience a creative resurrection. Ideas you had long abandoned suddenly re-emerge. Dreams you had buried come back to life. The voice of your own intuition, so long drowned out by the chorus of reasons why not, begins to speak again, quietly at first, then with increasing confidence. Have you felt the weightlessness that comes when you release someone who has been subtly destroying your sense of possibility? The sudden spaciousness in your mind, the return of wonder, the reawakening of perhaps? The sixth archetype that must be removed is the past anchor. These are the people who knew you when, who remind you of who you were, who continually pull you back to previous versions of yourself that you have outgrown. They introduce you by referencing your past accomplishments or failures. They tell the same stories about you at every gathering. They express surprise or discomfort when you display aspects of yourself that don't conform to their established image of who you are. This reflects a profound philosophical misunderstanding about the nature of identity. We are not fixed entities, but rather processes of continuous becoming. The person you were 5 years ago, 1 year ago, even yesterday, is not precisely who you are today. Like a river that appears constant, but is composed of entirely different water from moment to moment. You maintain the appearance of continuity while being in a state of perpetual transformation. In nature, this principle is perfectly illustrated by the snake shedding its skin. The snake does not apologize for outgrowing its previous covering. It does not try to squeeze itself back into what no longer fits. It simply releases what has served its purpose and continues its evolution. This is not an act of rejection, but an act of honor. The skin served exactly as it was meant to, protecting the snake during a particular phase of growth, Now it must be released with gratitude so that new growth can occur. The paradox here is that the highest loyalty you can show to relationships that have served their purpose is to honor your own growth, even when that growth takes you beyond the boundaries of how that relationship has defined you. By trying to maintain connections with those who insist on relating to previous versions of yourself, you betray both your own becoming and the authentic purpose of those relationships in your life journey. When you remove past anchors, you discover the exhilaration of being fully present to your own evolution. You no longer split your energy between who you are becoming and who you once were. You release the exhausting effort of trying to maintain consistency with your previous selves for the comfort of others. You honor what was by fully embracing what is and what is becoming. The seventh archetype to remove is the emotional alchemist. These individuals possess a remarkable and disturbing talent. They can transmute your positive emotional states into negative ones with subtle and devastating precision. You arrive in their presence feeling joyful, peaceful, inspired, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, you find yourself anxious, doubtful, or defensive. Through some mysterious alchemy, they transform your emotional gold into lead. To understand this dynamic requires recognizing that emotional energy is a transferable currency. Emotions are not simply internal, private experiences. They are energetic states that can be induced, amplified, or diminished through interaction. Some individuals have learned, usually unconsciously, to feed on this transformation process. They have become addicted to the momentary elevation they experience when they bring others down to their own emotional baseline. I knew someone who would systematically find the shadow in every light. Share good news about a promotion, and they would immediately mention the added stress and responsibility. Describe a beautiful sunset, and they would point out the pollution causing the vivid colors. Express excitement about a new relationship, and they would remind you of your past heartbreaks. No joy was left untarnished, no peace undisturbed, no enthusiasm unchallenged. The spiritual lesson here is that your emotional state is sacred. It is the lens through which you experience your life, the energetic foundation from which you create your reality. Guarding it is not selfishness, but spiritual stewardship. When you allow emotional alchemists access to your internal emotional environment, you surrender control of the most intimate aspect of your lived experience. By removing these influences from your life, you begin to discover your natural emotional baseline, often for the first time. Many people are shocked to realize how much more peaceful, optimistic, and centered they naturally are when they are no longer subject to constant emotional manipulation. Your energy field rebalances. Your emotional resilience strengthens. You reclaim sovereignty over your internal state. The eighth archetype to remove is the false mirror. These are people who reflect back a distorted image of who you are, creating profound confusion about your own nature, capabilities, and path. Unlike direct critics who simply judge you, false mirrors create something more insidious, a warped reflection that you begin to mistake for yourself. They misinterpret your words, project their fears onto your actions, and relate not to you, but to their internally constructed version of you. This speaks to a deeper philosophical truth about human identity formation. We do not develop our sense of self in isolation, but through countless reflections from others. Like a hall of mirrors, we piece together who we are from how we are seen. When those mirrors are relatively clear, this process serves growth, but when they are significantly distorted, we internalize these distortions, mistaking them for authentic aspects of ourselves. The paradoxical insight here is that sometimes being unseen is far better than being seen inaccurately. The pain of invisibility may be great, but the confusion of persistent misrecognition is greater still. It introduces a cognitive dissonance so profound that you begin to doubt your own perceptions, your own experiences, your own knowing about who you are. Finding clear mirrors, people who can see you accurately and reflect you back to yourself with minimal distortion, is perhaps one of the most important spiritual tasks of a lifetime. These clear mirrors are not those who simply validate or flatter you, but those who can witness your full complexity, your light and shadow, your actualities and your potentials, and reflect them back with clarity and compassion. When you remove false mirrors from your life, the fog of confusion begins to lift. The energy previously spent reconciling contradictions between your experience and their reflection becomes available for authentic growth. You start to trust your own perceptions again. You rediscover aspects of yourself that you had begun to doubt or deny because they went unrecognized or were actively contradicted by these distorted reflections. The ninth and final archetype to remove from your life is the freedom denier. These are often the most difficult to identify and release because they frequently operate through the guise of love and protection. They are the people who, out of genuine care and concern, create gilded cages that limit your essential freedom. They worry when you take risks. They question your unconventional choices. They subtly punish your independence with concern, guilt, or withdrawal. They will love you. They will protect you. They will destroy your essence. The philosophical depth here involves recognizing that love without freedom is ultimately a sophisticated form of control. True love must include the willingness to risk loss, to allow the beloved their full autonomy, even when their choices may lead them away from us. Anything less is not love, but possession, not care, but control, not relationship, but ownership. The human spirit in its natural state resembles wild animals. Observe what happens when magnificent creatures like wolves or eagles are placed in captivity. Even when all their physical needs are met, even when they are protected from predators and provided with regular meals, something essential begins to die within them. Their eyes lose their brightness. Their movements become repetitive. Their natural behaviors start to distort. Despite physical comfort, they experience a kind of soul death. The same happens to the human spirit when its freedom is compromised, even in comfortable, well-intentioned cages. The spiritual lesson is perhaps the most challenging of all. Authentic love always includes the pain of allowing complete freedom. It is a love that says, "I care for you so deeply that I am willing to let you go wherever your spirit calls you, even if that means away from me." It is a love that values the others becoming above their proximity. It is a love that finds its fulfillment not in possession, but in witnessing the other's full unfolding. Removing freedom deniers from your life, particularly when they are close family members or intimate partners, requires enormous courage. These may be the most difficult relationships to transform or release. But the liberation that follows is the most profound. You discover what it means to be fully sovereign in your choices, to follow your internal compass without the constant recalibration of others' fears and expectations. Now that we've identified these 9 archetypal figures, you might be wondering what happens in the space created by their absence. This is where the true transformation begins. For it is not enough to simply remove what constrains you. You must also consciously invite in what expands you. The vacuum left by these departures creates a powerful drawing force, and what you draw in next will determine everything about who you become. Now we arrive at the heart of this teaching, at the paradox that lies at the center of all spiritual wisdom. You see, this entire discussion about removing people from your life isn't actually about them at all. It's about you. It's about reclaiming your energy, your sovereignty, your authentic path of becoming. The focus on others has been a necessary detour, but now we must return to the fundamental truth. Liberation begins within. The first paradox to understand is that removal is actually about creation, not destruction. When you remove what does not serve your highest evolution, you are not engaging in an act of rejection, but an act of profound creation. You are creating space. And in the economy of human energy, space is the prerequisite for all new becoming. Just as an artist needs a clean canvas, a writer needs a blank page, and a composer needs silence, your becoming self needs space in which to unfold. Think about it. The universe itself began with space. Before there were galaxies, planets, life forms, there was space, pregnant with potential. In your own life, this principle remains constant. New relationships, insights, creative expressions, and ways of being can only emerge when there is space for them to enter. By removing these 9 archetypal figures, you create the necessary conditions for your authentic life to take shape. But here's the thing. This process of removal must be approached with consciousness and compassion, not with anger or blame. Because the second paradox is that conscious separation can be the highest form of respect for both parties. When you recognize that a relationship no longer serves mutual growth, that it has become constrictive rather than expansive, releasing that connection honors the truth of what is. It acknowledges reality rather than clinging to illusion. It respects both your path and theirs rather than forcing a connection that has run its natural course. In nature, this principle is perfectly illustrated by forest fires. For centuries, humans misunderstood these fires, seeing them only as destructive forces to be suppressed and controlled. But we now understand that certain forest ecosystems actually require periodic fires for their health and renewal. The fire clears away undergrowth, returns nutrients to the soil, and even triggers the germination of certain seeds that can only open in response to heat. What appears as pure destruction is actually a vital part of the forest's life cycle, creating space for new growth that would otherwise be impossible. So too with relationships. What appears as the destruction of connection is often the necessary clearing that allows new growth for all involved. The energy previously locked in maintaining dysfunctional patterns becomes available for new creation. The space formerly occupied by mutual limitation becomes open for mutual liberation. This brings us to the practice of compassionate removal versus angry rejection. Compassionate removal recognizes that the issue is not that the other person is bad or wrong, but simply that the energetic exchange between you no longer serves your mutual evolution. It holds no judgment, no blame, no villainizing of the other. It simply acknowledges the reality of what is and makes choices based on that clear seeing. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. We are conditioned to believe that ending relationships is failure, that it represents a lack of commitment, patience, or love. But what if we've misunderstood love entirely? What if true love includes the willingness to release as well as to hold? What if commitment to another's highest good sometimes means stepping away so they can find their own path without the distortion of your presence? When you approach removal with this consciousness, you transform not only the relationships you release, but also the ones you maintain. You bring new clarity, new intentionality, new appreciation to the connections that truly do serve your becoming. You stop taking these nourishing relationships for granted because you now understand their rarity and preciousness. You engage with deeper presence because you're no longer dissipating energy in connections that deplete you. The practical wisdom here begins with discernment. How do you know when removal is necessary versus when transformation is possible? Start by observing your energy. After interactions with specific people, do you feel expanded or contracted? Energized or depleted? Clearer or more confused? Your body and energy field will tell you what your mind might rationalize away. Pay attention to these subtle signals. They are your internal guidance system, communicating vital information about what serves your evolution and what does not. Next, consider whether the issue lies in the fundamental nature of the relationship or in specific patterns of interaction. Some relationships are inherently misaligned, but many are simply caught in unconscious patterns that could be transformed through awareness and communication. Before removing someone entirely, consider whether setting clearer boundaries, adjusting expectations, or having honest conversations might shift the dynamic into one that serves growth. Remember also that removal doesn't always mean physical separation. Sometimes it means energetic boundaries. This is particularly important with family members or colleagues with whom some level of interaction may be necessary. You can limit the frequency, duration, and depth of engagement. You can consciously manage your energy before, during, and after interactions. You can internally release expectations of understanding or validation from them, while still maintaining necessary outward connection. Perhaps most importantly, practice releasing others to their own path. This is the spiritual heart of this teaching. When you recognize that someone's presence in your life no longer serves mutual growth, you can mentally and energetically set them free to follow their own journey. You can say internally, "I release you to your path, as I now follow mine. I wish for you the connections that will best serve your becoming, even as I now seek the same for myself." This release is an act of love, not of rejection. As we return to where we began, consider again the garden metaphor. You are both the garden and the gardener of your life. The relationships you cultivate are not separate from you, but are extensions of your own consciousness, reflections of your internal state, manifestations of your beliefs about what you deserve and what is possible. As you remove what does not belong in your garden, you make a profound statement about your own worthiness, about your commitment to your own flowering. The ultimate paradox in all of this is that true connection with others requires a willingness to be separate. It is only when you are willing to stand fully in your own sovereignty, completely committed to your own path, regardless of who walks beside you, that you become capable of authentic relationship. Because real connection can only exist between two whole, distinct beings who choose each other freely, not between fragmented selves desperately seeking completion through attachment. What becomes possible when you no longer carry the weight of these 9 archetypal relationships? What dreams might you pursue? What gifts might you develop? What joy might you embody when your energy is no longer drained by these connections? The space created through conscious release becomes the womb of your new becoming, pregnant with possibilities that cannot yet be named, but that call to you nonetheless. The people closest to you are either expanding your consciousness or constricting it. Now you know which is which. The choice, as it always has been, remains yours. Not a choice made once and completed, but a choice made again and again as you continue to evolve, as your needs and path continue to unfold, as you become ever more discerning about what truly serves the authentic expression of who you are becoming. This is the ongoing practice of conscious relationship, of intentional connection, of deliberate cultivation of your human garden. And in this practice lies one of the most direct paths to liberation, not just from others, but from the conditioned self that has accepted limitation for far too long.